Hello and welcome to Who's the Bossk? It's a Star Wars podcast from laughingplace.com. My name is Mike Celestino. I am your host. I am the lead Southern California reporter and editorial director for Star Wars content at Laughing Place. This is episode number 134 of Who's the Bossk, and we are going to be talking about the latest episode of The Bad Batch, the animated series on Disney Plus, and the season finale of Willow from Lucasfilm, also on Disney Plus. And for that discussion, I have invited on the show a new friend from social media and a contributor at StarWars.com, which is very exciting. Her name is Kristen Bates. Kristen, thank you so much for coming on the show. How are you? What else can we learn about you personally?
Well, first of all, it's fantastic to be here. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Absolutely. Very, very happy to have you.
134. That's crazy. It's a lot of episodes.
Thank you.
A little bit more about me. I do freelance and contributing writing for the StarWars.com online team. I did a cool video package with them during the last Star Wars celebration where I got a Star Wars tattoo and covered that for their live show. So it's actually right here, Anakin's little necklace that he gives
the Japor snippet.
Yes.
Yeah.
I bled for Lucasfilm, but outside of that, I'm also a producer, and currently I'm doing a little bit of project management with Rooster Teeth. So I don't know if you're familiar with the company Rooster Teeth.
I'm not. Can you tell me a little bit about that? What's Rooster Teeth all about?
Rooster Teeth is a company that is all about silly nonsense and good vibes. We have a lot of people that work with us and do podcasts and some video content. So we have people like Achievement Hunter, Face Jam has their own food show right now, and a few others that are really cool and notable. So we work with all of them to help produce some really cool stuff. And I help primarily with the marketing and e-commerce team too. So my fingers are in a lot of pies right now.
Excellent. So if people want to find your writing at StarWars.com, I think they know how to do that. And then I'm guessing Rooster Teeth, is that roosterteeth.com as well?
Yeah. Check out their website.
Okay.
They have really anything for everybody's interest. They have kind of a true crime / horror podcast if people are interested in that stuff. A podcast primarily for people who are foodies, and Achievement Hunters all about video games. So I know a lot of us really love video games. So there's really something for everybody there.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for that. And let's get into the next segment, which is called the 5 Star Wars questions. And this is where we learn all about kind of a baseline of our guests' Star Wars fandom. Are you ready for this, Kristen?
I am ready for this.
Okay.
I'm prepping.
Excellent. So the first of the 5 Star Wars questions is, what is your earliest Star Wars memory?
So my earliest Star Wars memory was when I saw the trailer for Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, in theaters. And I saw that trailer when my dad was taking us to see the re-released versions of the original trilogy. So he was getting me hyped up about Star Wars, saying, hey, you got to watch this. You got to watch this. It's going to rock your world. I was 7 when I watched it for the first time. And it came out when I was about 6 or 7. I'm sure that ages a lot of people here, and I'm sorry, but that's just the way it is.
Yeah.
And so I remember going to that movie theater. It was in a small town, and I think they had about 3 or 4 screens for the movie theater at the time. But we sat there, and that trailer came on for The Phantom Menace, and I was just blown away, just with all of the stuff that was happening, and then seeing Padme on screen. I remember that going, oh, this is a big deal. I like this.
Forgive me for questioning any part of your memory. I do not want to be that guy, but just the dork and the nitpicker in me is going, well, the re-releases of the original trilogy, the special editions, were early 1997, and then the trailer for The Phantom Menace would have come out like 2 years later.
Yeah.
So is it possible that you saw it in front of another movie?
It might have been, but I also know that my movie theater at the time was kind of doing another promo. So
okay, so it's possible they were playing the movies later on.
Yeah, they were playing movies later on to get people to see The Phantom Menace.
Okay.
So it's very possible that is the case as well.
That's awesome.
I do remember seeing that and then jumping into A New Hope.
I remember when the trailer for The Phantom Menace came out. I was a freshman in college, and the only way you could see it other than on a very tiny screen, which, the internet with video in the late 90s, it wasn't that great. So you want to go to the theater and see it, and it was playing in front of the movie Meet Joe Black starring Brad Pitt.
Oh my gosh, what a movie. I completely forgot about that. That's amazing.
Yeah, we all went. My buddies and I, my dorky buddies and I, went to see Meet Joe Black just to see the Phantom Menace trailer. And yeah, it was a fine film, regardless of that. But anyway, let's get to number 2 of the 5 Star Wars questions. Which is your current favorite Star Wars movie or TV show, and why?
So it is interesting how Star Wars grows and changes with you as you get older.
Yeah.
And it means something to you when you're a kid, and it means something different when you're an adult. So as I've been watching the movies over the years and being introduced to the TV shows, my current favorite, I would say, is the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. And I feel like it does a really good job of blending that prequel energy from the prequel trilogy with what's going on with the Empire and with Darth Vader, and we get a better idea of the conflict that's going on. We see a little bit more what's going on in Obi-Wan Kenobi's head as he's on Tatooine and dealing with his isolation and watching over Luke. And then we also get little Leia, which she's just amazing. And it's all around a fantastic series. So I would say that's my favorite one currently, but it will
Okay.
probably change.
Great. That's actually the first time we've gotten Obi-Wan Kenobi as
Oh,
the favorite. So that's awesome. I have to ask then, did you have it were you at Star Wars Celebration this past year in Anaheim?
I was,
Did you
yes.
get to go to the big premiere?
Yes, I did, and that definitely plays a part in it being my favorite just because
Okay.
of that experience and seeing them all walking out, and we get, like, this nice Hayden Christensen renaissance that's happening, so that hyped up my love for the prequel trilogy and even more so for the Kenobi series, so yes, absolutely.
Awesome. Yeah, that was a great experience. I was there in the room as well, and it really, yeah, I think the energy walking out of that screening really
Yeah,
helped the appreciation of that series.
absolutely, yes.
That's
Oh
for
my
sure.
gosh, that's fantastic.
Definitely agreed. All right, number 3 of the 5 Star Wars questions. Who is your favorite Star Wars character and why?
So I know this is going to be a generic answer, but I really think Luke Skywalker is my favorite Star Wars character, and particularly because of his appearance in the Battlefront 2 story campaign
Okay.
and how he interacts with people there and his quote of, you always have a choice and it's a choice to be better. And I feel like that's such a good quote. It's perfect coming from Luke and it really pulls everything together with the Skywalker saga. So Luke's my favorite character. His journey, his wisdom, and how he's portrayed throughout his life. I like it. I like it a lot.
Excellent. Somewhere I have among my many collectibles is the star compass from Battlefront, which
Oh, that's so
they
cool.
sell at Doc Ondar's Den of Antiquities and Galaxy's Edge, which I thought, oh, this is such a weird, like, obscure prop that wasn't even made for a movie or anything. It's from a video
Yeah,
game.
for a video game, which is fantastic.
Yeah, yeah. I love that choice and the reasoning behind it. Number 4, if you happen to live in the fictional Star Wars universe, where do you think you would fit in? What faction would you belong to? So the choices I always list off are the Jedi Order, the Sith, the Rebel Alliance, the Empire, the Bounty Hunters, the scum and villainy hanging out in the cantina, or anything else that you could come up with. What do you think, Kristen? Where would you fit in?
I would wanna just have a lot of fun. Like, what's the faction that has the most possible fun that you're not in an absorbent amount of danger? And I feel like the every time I see anything to do with the rebellion or the resistance, it seems like they're having fun, even though, yes, they're fighting a very oppressive regime and they're going against an evil empire, evil first order. They're having fun with it, they're cutting up, and it's this vibe of, well, if this is it, I'm going to go all in, guns blazing. So I feel like I'd want to be part of the rebellion, which
Okay.
I mean, it's not the best reason of, I want to fight against injustice. It's I want to have fun, what's I just want to have a good time. Good
Definitely
vibes.
fun. I don't know if they can promise you not being in danger. I don't know if they
Yeah.
can fill in that part of it. I was thinking when you said fun, I was thinking maybe the swoop gang in the
Ooh.
Book of Boba Fett, the
Yeah.
guys that drive all those scooters
I don't
around.
know. I would be so intimidated by them, like,
Okay.
because I love them so much and they're so cool. Like, if I were to approach them, I'd just be like, "Hey, how's it
Right.
going?"
Also, to
You're
fit
cool.
in with them, you have to have like cybernetic parts, right? Like get your arm replaced by a robot arm.
And I'm down with that.
Yeah,
I
down
am
with that. Okay,
100% down with that. But,
great.
they're just so cool. I would be so intimidated by them.
Very cool. All right. The fifth and final of the five Star Wars questions is called impression or possession. This is where I ask my guest to choose to either one of those do a Star Wars impression or opt out and simply tell me about a favorite Star Wars possession you may own. What do you think, Kristen? Which one would you like to
I
choose?
wish I was good at impressions. I wish more than anything
Okay.
I was good at impressions, and I wish that I was good at giving an impression of some, obscure glup shitto in the Star Wars universe, and that being my party trick, but alas, I was not gifted with that talent, so I will have to show off my favorite Star Wars possession. A lot of them are packed away right now because
Okay.
we're in limbo, but I did have this out. This is a Star Wars. Oh, that's not helping. I'm holding up a tin can that has
Gotcha.
R2D2 on it, and it's a Star Wars Episode 1 tin
Okay.
can. And what is in the tin can, you may ask? Well, great question. I'm so glad you asked that.
It looks
It
like
is,
can I guess before you show me?
yes,
They
you
look
can.
like it looks like maybe a like a sunglasses container?
Ooh, good
Oh,
guess. But you're wrong.
okay.
This is an R2D2 watch. I'm gonna do like
Okay.
the makeup tutorials where they put their hand back to show the color as like a dark blue wristband, and then R2D2 is like this copper metal
Oh,
as the watch. And then you press his middle foot, and then that's when you can see the time
that's
on the
does it
inside.
still
But
work?
no, I have to put batteries in it. But
Okay.
this is my one of my favorites. I have a Jar Jar Binks watch from Star Wars Episode 1 that I love dearly as well, and his, like, face opens up and you can
Oh,
see
yeah.
the time inside. So it's very morbid, but that's okay. That's okay. So that's my
Fantastic.
favorite Star Wars possession.
I love it. Thank you for showing that, and, that is gonna bring us to the end of the 5 Star Wars questions and to our next segment. It's called Star Wars Headlines. This is where we just talk about news coming out of a galaxy far, far away over the past week. So we found out, I think yesterday, that the second trailer for The Mandalorian season 3 will be released this coming, what is it, Monday, I think, January 16th during ESPN's Super Wild Card game. Now, not being a sports person, I do not know what the wild card game is. Do you know what sport this would be?
I'm
I
assuming it's
should have done more
football.
research.
I think
Football sounds right.
if it's Monday night, they do Monday Night Football.
Okay.
And most trailers and stuff debut during football season anyways. So
That
I don't
makes
know.
sense.
Unless it's basketball, because I know we're still in basketball season right now.
Probably
But
not baseball, right? Baseball's summertime. So uh
it could
check
be
it.
like lacrosse, maybe
Yeah,
axe throwing. I don't know.
right. One of those. Are you excited for Mandalorian season 3, Kristen?
I'm very excited for Mandalorian season 3, especially how things ended with Book of Boba Fett, where
Right.
Grogu leaves Luke Skywalker's training and
Yeah.
goes back to Din to hang out with him. So I'm very excited to see where that
Yeah, they're
goes.
flying around in that Naboo starfighter, the N1. What do you
Amazing.
expect? What do you think we'll see in this trailer? You think we'll get a lot of new stuff, or are they going to keep the rest of the season pretty close to the vest?
I Here's what I want. This isn't going to happen, but here's what I want. I want an Emperor's New Groove style trailer, but it's Grogu talking, and he has like a normal voice, and he's like, "Hey, I'm sure you're wondering how I got in the situation." He's like writing over the scenes and circling, like, "This is me. This
Right.
is what's going on." That's what I want.
Is
Um,
is his voice David Spade?
oh my gosh. Yeah, we're gonna
Okay,
go with that.
great.
And he's just very sarcastic
Yeah.
and just having a good time. That's what I want.
Fantastic. We'll see if that happens. Check that out on Monday. In publishing news, Marvel has announced a new Star Wars comic book miniseries called Darth Vader: Black, White, and Red, and this is starting in April. And this is where I'm going to ask you, Kristen, what's your relationship with the Star Wars comic books?
So, unfortunately, the relationship is not that great. I'm very behind on Star Wars comic books, but everything I've read from like the Darth Vader Star Wars comic books have been so fantastic with the
Yeah.
character. So, I'm all for a mini series exploring him some more. So, I have no idea when it's set or if it's a continuation, but I'm all for it.
I want to say from the press release I read, it's kind of taking place throughout his existence, kind of after turning from Anakin into Darth Vader, but then throughout his life from after Order 66 until
Interesting.
his death in Return of the Jedi. So
Okay.
that will be coming up starting in April. And then that's a good segue to talk into the next little bullet point here, which is if you go to laughingplace.com, you can read some comic book reviews that I wrote for this week and the new titles. They've just been churning out these comics. So I understand completely when people have fallen behind
Yeah.
on them because there can be up to like 4 and 5 new Star Wars comics every week.
Yeah.
This week we got the High Republic #4 from phase 2 of the High Republic, the High Republic Adventures #2, Darth Vader #30, and the only one I haven't read of these, I haven't found time yet, is the Mandalorian #7. But the Mandalorian comic, as you probably know, is just an adaptation of the series. So I'll get to that soon. It's just an adaptation of the penultimate episode of season 1. I've enjoyed those, even though I already know the stories. But as I said, just go to laughingplace.com. You can read my recaps and reviews of all those comics. Next item on the list is some new Star Wars geeky tikis. These are like ceramic tiki mugs that you can get at Entertainment Earth, and we've got photos of the new ones over at Laughing Place. Cad Bane, the
Mm.
bounty hunter, and Rex, not the clone Captain Rex, but the droid Captain Rex, who eventually became the DJ at Oga's Cantina on Batu. He's getting his geeky tiki. And then Black Chrysanthemum, another bounty hunter, the Wookiee bounty hunter from Book of Boba Fett. Is this something that you would pick up, something that you would add to your collection, Kristen?
100%.
Yeah.
I'm not as an avid collector as other Geeky Tiki collectors,
Okay.
but I do have a few. I have like obviously I have a Padme Amidala Geeky Tiki, obviously.
Okay.
But I would absolutely get a Cad Bane one in a heartbeat. And I love all the designs of them. So yes, 100%.
Fantastic. Yeah, the Cad Bane one's really cool. If I had to pick one, I'd probably get the Rex
Mm,
one because I'm a fan of the parks and Galaxy's Edge. But yeah, all three of these are very attractive, and you can check them out at Entertainment Earth or follow the link from laughingplace.com. And I think we get a small percentage of that if you buy through the hot link at Laughing Place. So last item on the list from headlines this week is not Star Wars related, but it is Lucasfilm related. So I have to ask you, Kristen, are you an Indiana Jones fan at all?
oh my gosh,
Okay.
yes. I love Indiana Jones. Of course.
How are you excited for this new film coming out
Yes. Oh my
in the
gosh.
summer?
Listen, when that trailer was released, I cried. I cried. Not an ugly cry, but there was definitely, yeah, a tear. And I'm so excited for it. It's going to be so good.
I'm very excited as well. And another thing I got to be in the room for was when they showed that footage at D23 Expo this
Oh, that's
past
amazing.
September. Yeah, and Harrison Ford was there, and
Mm,
he was getting emotional on stage, and uh, the footage was bringing tears to everybody's eyes in the audience. So that was pretty great. But the news coming out this week was from the merchandising end of Indiana Jones, because as this new movie is preparing to release, there's going to be plenty more products and merchandise coming to stores, including from one of the licensees, Hasbro, who is the toy company that makes the Star Wars action figures as well. But they revealed a bunch of new Indiana Jones toys and action figures, not only from the new movie, but also from the original films. There's some new stuff from Temple of Doom,
mm.
Last Crusade. They're doing retro collection figures from Raiders of the Lost Ark that are basically like re-releases of the original action figures. Are you an action figure collector at all? Is this stuff that would appeal to you?
This stuff appeals to me in the sense that I'm glad we're getting Indiana Jones action figures because I didn't really have many, or I didn't think I have any Indiana Jones action figures. I
Okay.
have a lot of Star Wars action figures, but I was actually at one of those comic book shops the other day, just perusing the selection, and they had a couple of Indiana Jones action figures from the second one, the Temple
Temple
of
of
Doom.
Doom.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
Hmm.
And they looked really cool, but they were asking over $100 for that,
Oh
and
wow.
I was like, "No, I don't need this." So now that Hasbro's coming out with a new collection, I can justify getting that. So I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. Gosh, I'm gonna be spending a lot of money on these figures. But if you want to learn more about that, we have a whole post over at laughingplace.com, or you can visit Hasbro Pulse, and that's where you can pre-order a lot of the Indiana Jones stuff coming out. And speaking of Hasbro, if you're listening to this podcast later on, I'm going to include right here an interview that I did with the Hasbro Star Wars team just
Oh,
last
that's so
week.
cool.
I know it was a great opportunity to speak with them. We talked about the Return of the Jedi 40th anniversary collection,
Mhm.
their relationship with Disney parks and all the products that they put out through them, the recent announcements of new Legends characters like Mara Jade is coming to the Black
Oh.
series, Darth Malak from the Knights of the Old Republic game. So we talk about all that kind of stuff. I'm going to put that right here. Unfortunately, if you're watching live on the Laughing Place YouTube channel, you won't hear that, but check out the podcast when I do put it up later on in the day. And you can listen to my questions with the Hasbro Star Wars team. Okay, that brings us to the end of Star Wars headlines for this week and to our first of two main topics. First, we're going to talk about Willow. Willow
Hmm.
is a sequel series, a sequel to the original 1988 film Willow from Lucasfilm, but this series was a follow-up on that movie, and it was released on Disney Plus, and it just ended. The first season just ended this past week, or this past Wednesday. The title of this new episode was Children of the Worm. But first, I'm going to ask you, Kristen, what was your relationship with the original film, and what were your expectations going into this series?
So I didn't really have a relationship with the original film until last year sometime. And that's right around the time that they started teasing a Willow series.
Right.
And I didn't grow up with the film. I know a lot of people did, and it meant something very special to them. So I had this mindset of, I really want to tap into that because if it means a lot to them, it's worth watching, obviously. So I actually got to sit down with my husband and his parents, and we got to watch Willow together. And I really enjoyed the movie. I loved the themes of it. And I loved how they carried sort of similar themes to us as Star Wars fans that we all know and love about the choice to be better. Your family doesn't define who you are. And, you can be good and make good choices. And it doesn't matter your size, you can still be the main person that saves the day. So I really loved that. And I really had fun watching the movie. That was my main thing. I had a lot of fun with it. So my expectations for the series, I didn't have any expectations. I wanted to walk in totally surprised. Well, I did have one expectation. I did want to just have fun with the series. And if I had fun and enjoyed it, cool. And obviously the series has surpassed my expectations. I loved it so much.
Great. So let's get into that a little bit more then. So, what did you think? You said obviously you're enjoying the series based on what you just said, but what did you think specifically of the first 7 episodes? Let's talk about the actual story itself. Let's talk about some of the characters. What were your thoughts about the world that has been expanded upon in this show?
Well, right off the gate, I loved that they kept Alora secret.
Yeah,
And within the first 2 episodes, I already assumed that Jade was going to be Alora. I thought she
I
has
did
red
too.
hair. She's, been kept close to Sorsha, so she's been training to fight. So I have to assume that that's Alora. But I was not expecting it to be who it was. So that was really cool. And I loved as the episodes progressed, as she continued to use her magic, her hair returned to its color.
Yes.
I thought that was really cool. I loved Kit and Jade's storyline. I loved that relationship that they have, and I really want that to grow. Um, I also really loved how Graydon became a sorcerer. Essentially,
Right.
like you see him taking notes throughout the episodes and chanting to himself, and he's able to pick it up so quickly. And I really feel like that's something that Willow wasn't expecting.
Mhm.
So I feel like a lot's unintentionally on Graydon's shoulders with how this events are going to go, whether Alora dies like in the vision with the crone or if she lives. So I think Graydon has a lot more character development that we're going to see later on. So and then just it's beautiful. All the scenes,
Oh yeah.
it's so beautiful to watch.
The visuals are just incredible.
Mhm.
I was just saying this to my wife yesterday. Like, I've been so impressed by so many of the shots. I'm just like aghast at how cool the visuals are and the visual effects. They really just knocked that part of the show
Yeah.
completely out of the park. So let's get into this season finale, which is called Children of the Worm, is the title. What is your interpretation of that title? I guess to start this off, Kristen, what do you think Children of the
Oh,
Worm
man.
means?
I
And
assume
what is the worm that we learned about in this episode?
I I keep thinking I don't know if you've watched SpongeBob growing up,
A little bit.
but
It
the
was a little
Alaskan
after my time.
glowworm,
Okay.
that they have to fight, I don't know why I just keep thinking about that, but that's what I picture with, Children of the Worm.
Okay.
But I assume Children of the Worm means, the sort of the crone and her goonies, like her goons that were with her.
Yeah.
I
Mhm.
assumed that's what it was,
Okay.
and it would almost be Eric. So I have to assume it's any disciple that's getting down with what the worm has to offer.
Right.
But that thing looks disgusting. I'm not interested. I'm not interested in what it's trying to sell me. No, thank you. Absolutely
So
not. I need to drink its goop. No, we're out.
right.
Absolutely not.
Yeah, my wife pointed out that when they're drinking the water or whatever from that well outside, it almost looks okay. You're just like, "Oh, it's just water that's, like, brown and runny." But then
Yeah.
when they get inside the temple and it's running down that little, canal in the middle of the temple,
Yeah.
it looks all viscous and gooey.
Yeah. It's like worm secretions. Why are you actively drinking that? That's disgusting. And you're like, "Yeah, this thing is gonna make our place better." No, it's not.
Yeah.
It's worm goop all over the place.
So they call the worm a harbinger, and that it's they say it's gonna, like, basically take over the world and usher in this new age, which the crone or this, this face that the crone puts on that we
Yeah.
call Lily, which is a, this young, beautiful woman representing the crone, excuse me. But um, she's trying to tell Eric and the others that this is a good thing. It's going to benefit the world, and I don't think anybody on the good guys side is really believing anything
Yeah.
that she has to
And then, like,
say.
when the crone like, when Eric's, like, making out with the crone and they're just like, "No, absolutely not." The faces that they make, same. Absolutely
Right.
same. I just love
So
how
yeah.
quickly Eric caved at the sight of a beautiful woman. Like, his heart was set on Allura. I love
Yeah.
her, she's the one, and then she walks out and kind of does some playful banter, and then all of a sudden he's in. He caved so quickly. It's very interesting to me.
He put up a little bit of a like, he was like, "Oh, I love, Dove," as he calls her,
Yeah.
and he tried to run away, and then he finds that, like, the city is really just if you keep going in one direction, you end up back
Yeah.
where you were. So it
I
was tough for him to
guess.
run away.
It's yeah, if you're kind of hopeless and there's
Yeah.
a pretty person there, then okay, fine. But I laughed at, okay, so the crone knows Eric's weakness is a pretty face. So that's very funny to me.
Yeah, absolutely. So in this episode, our heroes kind of find themselves at the edge of the world, across the shattered sea, as they call it, in this place called the Immemorial City, which is kind of this abandoned ancient city, and they're confronting the forces of the worm and the crone or whatever, and they kind of so there's this big dust storm that arrives and starts turning everybody to stone, kind of like we saw in the original film.
Mhm.
And was it Tirazline, I think, where they were turned to stone, and then they kind of all get sucked into this fantasy world where their dreams are promised to come true. Basically, they could live the lives they always wanted. What did you think of those kind of fantasy sequences?
I loved that they were presented with a choice, and the choices that they were presented with weren't necessarily obviously a trap because you had Sorsha coming to Kit saying, "I can't. It's hard for me to admit that I'm wrong, and you know, I'm sorry." And giving Kit what Kit wants, but it's you relate to that, especially if you have parents or family members that are wrong. It's there's nothing better than having them say, "Hey, you're right." And then
Yeah,
in Alora's situation where all she wanted was to cross the world to find Eric, and she did. And they're acknowledging that they're saying, "Hey, you did this. You've earned this." what I found fascinating was during that how Mad Mardigan was able to talk to Kit.
Right.
And, that raised a lot of questions of, where is he at? Is he a prisoner in this fantasy world? Is he inside the worm? That's gross. But I have like, I'm wondering how he's there and what he's like, what his end goal is there.
Yeah, we should mention that Mad Mardigan's voice is performed by Val Kilmer's son, Jack Kilmer, and I
That's so
believe
cool.
I saw somewhere I think that they're tweaking it a little bit digitally as well to make it sound a little bit more like Val Kilmer. But yeah, it's cool that Van Mardigan at least has this presence as a voice in the series. And yeah, I had the same questions as you as to where he actually is, and if we do come back for another season, if we'll get to see him. Because
Yeah.
I know John Caston, the showrunner, has talked about how he has, they're trying to work Val Kilmer into the show now that he's been in Top Gun and stuff over the summer last year. So hopefully that will happen. The other thing I wanted to say about this fantasy world is that it kind of reminded me of. Have you ever seen the movie Labyrinth?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, there's this segment in that movie where Jennifer Connelly's character kind of gets sucked into this fantasy again, and she's kind of back in her room and she's happy, and the little brother Toby or whatever his name is not there, and she's offered this opportunity to live this dream life without the brother annoying her, and then she
Yeah.
has to snap out of it kind of in the same way. So I did wonder if John Kasdan or whoever else. Let's see, the writer of this episode was Raina McClendon. I wonder if they were inspired by Labyrinth at all, since that was actually a Lucasfilm production
Yeah.
alongside Jim Henson too. But let's get into the climax of this episode. Then was kind of a big battle. Once they snap out of this dream world, there's a big battle, of course, between the crone and her monsters, which I think are called uh the Gales is the name
Mm.
of the monsters. One of them's played by Chewbacca Jonas Suotimo, that big guy with the cage on his head. That's
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
Jonas.
And it's funny when we first saw that,
Yeah.
Brant, my husband, he's like, "How does he eat?" And it's just questions like that. You're thinking,
Right.
"Oh, I don't know." I'm gonna think on that for a
You mean
while.
how does the character eat, or how does Jonas eat while he's
How
in the
does how
costume?
does the character eat? Because
Oh,
that
right.
cage is, like, embedded into him. Like,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know how he does it.
He's not beholden, I don't think, to those rules. He's just a magical.
Like, what if he
That would
wants
be
a
my
sandwich? What if
right.
he's feeling, like, some Thai food or, he's very limited in his
It's
options.
a good, hopefully he has like a little door in the
Yeah.
cage that opens like a canary, you
Unless he
know.
just drinks the worm goop, which,
That,
no.
yeah, that could be the bulk of his diet. That's a good point as well. So what did you think of this the final battle there between all these forces of good and evil, and all our heroes going up against these villains that we've come to know through this series?
I like that the final battle started without Willow there. I like that when we were on the edge before the immemorial city, Willow stays behind and we're given this thought process of, okay, these heroes have to continue their journey without Willow. Willow is Gandalf the Grey, if you will.
Yes.
And he can't journey on until something else happens. Maybe he'll turn into like Willow the White or something. I don't know. So they jump ahead, they face it head on. They're not doing it with the instruction of Willow, they're doing it on their own. And then, Willow comes in and he's able to save Alora one last time. So I liked that aspect of it where they made that choice to face it head on.
Mhm.
And that was really cool to see. I loved that Kit had the Mad Mardigan sword, and that Borman also gave her that chest plate. And it,
Yes.
it made me think that, we were made to believe that Mad Mardigan went on this, fool's errand with these guys to get this chest plate as a treasure hunt. But actually, he was probably getting that for Kit so he could prepare her for what's to come. And I thought, oh, that's really nice to think about that.
Yeah, it paid his little quest paid off in the
Yeah.
end.
Yeah.
And I love your analogy to Lord of the Rings, which I didn't think of. It's kind of like Gandalf coming back at the end of that battle where they have to look to the
Yeah,
east or
the
whatever
rising, yeah.
at daybreak, and he's riding down the hill. Yeah, it is a little when he
With
shows
his
up
green light.
at the wedding. Yeah, that's kind of the same moment. All these beats kind of repeat themselves from all these fantasy stories. But yeah, that's a great observation. And then we get into the very end of this finale. How did you feel about where everything kind of ends up? And we are obviously, I should have put a spoiler warning on here. If you haven't watched the Willow
Sorry.
finale, we are going to be talking about the very, very end of the episode because there is some big stuff. You know, we are left to think that one of the major characters has died in the
Mhm.
battle, and then there's a reveal before the credits, and then a mid credits reveal. So let's get into that. What were your thoughts on the very ending of the episode?
I think they did a really good job setting up for what the next season looks like,
Yeah.
and I like that, I think there's still a lot of unknowns around the crone. Um, I I don't know if she's one specific person or if she's just kind of this entity that takes on different forms. And my reasoning with that is the guy that they were staying at before trekking across the endless sea, he was
Yeah.
talking about one of his quests was rescuing a princess from Kashmir, I believe.
Okay.
And they talk about a missing princess, and then the crone presenting herself as Lily, I believe, to Eric. She says that she's the missing princess from Kashmir.
Right.
So
Right.
I don't know if the crone inhabits bodies, whereas when the crone took over Eric's body, if Eric would become the crone, or if it's like one specific person. So I have questions about that. I'm wondering if they're going to
Hmm.
explore that next season, or it could be a whole lot of nothing. I don't know,
No,
but
that's a great. Honestly, I hadn't made that connect. I'm very glad that you're on the show to talk about this because you know when that character that you're talking about, the old man played by Julian Glover, he's
yeah,
telling all these stories about his youth. I just took it kind of as a gag. Like I wasn't connecting this to the
yeah.
actual plot that they're the quest that they're going on. But yeah, I like that observation as well. But continue, please.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, my only question is how long ago did she disappear, and what does that timeline
Yeah,
look like? But I also like how Eric comes back and he's fine, and now he's going to continue the quest with Alora, Jade, Kit, and Borman, and he's going to have to kind of prove his worthiness. And I'm sure it's not going to be hard, but I like how that's set up where he gets to be the good guy. It's not going to be, brother pitted against sister. They're going to be able to work together. Maybe. I don't know if there's still a little bit of the crone swimming around in him. I don't know.
mhm,
But Graydon's journey is going to be very interesting. I like where they had him end off because at the beginning of the show, he was made to be this very weak and timid person, not really sure of himself, not very confident. But as the show progressed and we get to the season finale, he's very much more sure of himself. And I'm wondering if he wanted to intentionally distract the crone, so that Alora could have a chance, or if he truly was just exhausted from his using magic. So I'm curious to see if he's going to help Alora achieve, or Alora in that world, which could be the
right,
worm,
right.
achieve what she needs to achieve, or if he's going to have to fight by himself to get out of there. So I really like how that's set up.
Well, do you you were talking about how the crone may inhabit the bodies of others. Do you foresee a possibility of Graydon becoming kind of the next crone?
Yeah, yeah, and there's kind of something that alludes to it with him and his brother, how Graydon was
Right.
already infected with whatever it was that made him evil or
Yeah.
take from the source of the worm or whatever. So he's already been susceptible to that twice.
Yes.
So who's to say, third time's a charm, and maybe they're all going to have to fight against Graydon, and Graydon's going to be this great and powerful wizard, and maybe Willow's vision is Graydon killing Alora, which that's a lot.
That would be a lot. So I have two more questions for you about Willow. The first one is, what did you think of the series as a whole? This whole first season, now that it's concluded.
I A lot of good things. There's so many really interesting things that I think of this series. The visuals are stunning. I love how it's connecting an older story and making it its own
Yeah,
and adding new elements to it and making it more in tune for a newer audience. It's not kind of just relying on the older audience of the Willow movie. It's how can we make this our own to where if you haven't seen the movie, you'll be fine if you don't watch the movie. You
right.
should. It's great, but you'll be fine if you don't need to watch it.
Sure.
So I really like that. I also love the music at the end credits after each movie or after each show. I have my Shazam up ready to go because they've picked some killer songs at the
Yeah.
end that just
Well,
kind of hype
let's
you up
talk
for the rest
about
of the
that for a
show.
minute because I'm kind of torn about this because I have really liked a lot of the musical choices. When they played, I think it was at the end of episode 2 or 3, they had that cover of Donovan's, Hurdy Gurdy Man. I don't know if you remember that one, and
Yeah.
that song immediately went on loop on my Spotify in my car. I've just been jamming out to that. I love
Yeah.
that cover. And then this finale episode ended with so all the pretty much all these choices, these anachronistic but I think appropriate choices of pop songs or rock songs have all been covers up until the finale when
Mhm.
over the end credits it was the original version of the Dire Straits song Money for Nothing,
Yeah.
which I like that song. I grew up in the 80s. It was a hit back then. And I thought it was an interesting choice because I think the joke is that, they're in dire straits. Really, that to
Yeah.
me, the joke was the name of the band. But there were, as the credits are playing, especially when we get to the mid-credit sequence, which we're going to talk about in a bit, they get to the lyrics which reference like refrigerators and color TVs. And I was like,
Yeah.
this of all the songs, this feels the least appropriate to me, like, lyrically, I guess, of all the music. I don't know, do you have any thoughts about that?
I didn't even make that connection with Dire Straits,
Yeah,
and I love that. I think that's hilarious. I don't know what the last song. I'm still kind of trying to digest that connection, but I love that most of them have been covers
yeah,
because it's a new person adding their own new spin to a
right,
song, which is very relevant to the Willow series. It's new, fresh eyes adding a new spin to a beloved fantasy movie. So I like that, and all the covers have been fantastic. The Inner Sandman cover, Chef
yeah,
Kiss, beautiful.
okay.
So that's I really like that. That's in your perspective is very interesting.
Somebody must have put together a Spotify playlist with all the songs from the series, like, that has to exist,
That has
by
to.
now, right? Okay,
If not, get on it,
I'm
people.
gonna
Let's
hunt
go.
for that after this is over 'cause, yeah, a lot of really great, song choices, and I know I saw an interview with John Kasdan where he talked about having written those songs into the script, so it's not
Oh,
something that got
interesting.
added at the last minute or anything like that. That was definitely part of the intent and plan going in, but, this kinda leads me into another kind of B question, from that first question, which is, my only real major nitpick about this Willow series has been kind of the tonal shifts. And, the original film has a lot of action and adventure, and it is also fun and irreverent and silly in parts. But there were a couple episodes in this series, I think it was episode 5 and 6, that really, to me, steered the goofiness a little bit too far in that direction. And I think that they course corrected by last week's episode, the penultimate one, and this one I did enjoy a lot more, and I thought they found that balance between taking itself seriously and having a bit of comic relief in there. But I don't know, what are your thoughts? Did you ever find it steering a little bit too much towards silliness?
I don't know. I grew up on Jar Jar, so I'm all
Okay.
about silliness. I'm all about
Right.
the comedic relief,
Yeah.
and that's kind of my taste when it comes to shows, movies. Whenever something gets serious, someone kind of going, "No, this sucks."
Right,
It's
right,
just
right.
I don't know if if you're with your sibling and you guys are cracking up when your parents are very like on to you and you're like, "Get a load of this guy," and you guys are trying not to laugh. I think something about that laughing in the face of danger or laughing
Sure.
in the face of uncertainty is that's always been how I've handled things. Maybe that's not good, maybe that's not healthy, but that's for a different podcast. So I kind of liked that, and I really liked Borman's comedic relief and how
I did
he,
like Borman as well. Like
yeah,
he was the right kind of comic relief for me
yeah.
personally. But yeah,
Okay, okay. Yeah, and I really liked how at the last episode he wasn't really to confront, what he'd been going through, so he just jumps off a cliff like who among us.
right,
So I liked that. I liked Eric's aloofness.
sure,
He wasn't like this big tough guy, and he didn't really. I mean, I don't remember in the earlier shows him wanting to be king until he's taken over by the crown. So I the idea that even though these guys are probably in their 20s, since it takes place 20 years after the movie, they're
right,
still kids.
yeah,
So they're still cutting up. And Borman made a good point in the first episode. He's like, you guys have no idea what you're getting into. Like, you're cutting up and having fun now, but you have no idea what you're getting into. So it's, to me, it's like the not necessarily dying of youth. That sounds very dark, but
sure.
it's sort of this shift of, you know, we're having fun, we're cutting it now, but it's the last of our innocence, it's the last of our youth that we have before we have to start making grown-up decisions and doing grown-up tasks.
Yeah, I totally agree with you about the characters. I definitely really enjoyed all these new characters and seeing what they're all about and watching them progress, watch their arcs move along during the season. Overall, I would say I thought the Willow series was, I would say, it was pretty good on the whole.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would call it great. I am hoping so. This kind of brings us to my final question about Willow, because I did have those minor reservations about season one, but we did enter into this finale kind of not knowing whether this was going to be a season finale or a series finale. Then I
Yeah.
turned on Disney Plus on Wednesday morning and it said season finale. I was like, okay,
Mm.
well, I've heard John Kasdan talk about his ideas for later seasons. So are they officially making this a multi-season project? And then we get to this kind of mid credits sequence where the book closes that we've been seeing through the credits, opening credits and the closing credits of this whole series, and then a hand like puts the book on the shelf and there's three volumes, volume 1, volume 2, volume 3. The implication to me, and tell me if I'm misinterpreting this, but the implication being that we're going to get 3 total seasons of the series. Do you think first of all, am I interpreting that right? And secondly, do you think that's going to happen?
I mean, I'm in the same boat you are. That's how I
Yeah.
interpret it is. We are
Okay.
getting at least 2 more seasons. So that's exactly how I saw it.
But as far as we know, like, maybe I missed something, but as far as we know, I don't think Lucasfilm has officially announced a second season. It may not have
Yeah.
been actually renewed yet, but I'm hoping that it did well enough that enough people watched it that Lucasfilm or that Disney will renew the series. I don't know. What are you hoping if it does get renewed? What are you hoping to see if the series continues?
I really want to see more background on Borman and kind of
Okay.
him confronting his skeletons, and maybe there's a chance where he'll get to speak to Mad Mardigan with whatever he's doing.
Yeah.
And that would be kind of cool for that to happen. I want to see I want to see more bad Alora with that awesome haircut. See what she's up to. What's the vibe over there? And then I want to see more Sorsha throughout these next 2 seasons, a little bit more involvement from her. Maybe they return to Tira's Lane and say, hey, war's coming, get ready. And there's a little bit more character development with her and Kit, and perhaps Kit's relationship with Jade. So that's the main points that I want to see. I definitely want to see more Mims. I hope Mims makes more of a prominent appearance in
Okay.
the next season, if we get a next season.
Yeah, that would be great. And I mentioned my minor nitpicks with the show, and I do think that the creative team has been steadily finding their footing with certain things. So I think if it were to continue into another season or two, most of my favorite shows I feel like really found their voice by like the third season, like
Yeah.
it takes a little while to really settle into what the show is all about. So I'm guessing it will only improve from here on out. And we're just kind of waiting to hear about that official renewal. Is there anything else that you would like to say about Willow before we move on here?
I've just enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I really hope they renew for a second season and for a third season. I've loved watching the show. I've loved seeing all the behind the scenes stuff that the cast has put on their social media. It just it looks like a great time. I love that we're actually getting some more on camera
Yeah.
LGBTQ representation
Sure.
with a relationship with Kit and Jade, and I hope that's explored more. I hope it was so well received where they're like, yes, we have to continue this in as much mediums as possible. So that's fantastic. I hope to see more of that.
Great. Yeah, totally agreed. Hope we get some more news about Willow soon, but that's going to bring us to our final of the two main topics for this week's episode, and that is the Bad Batch, the animated series from Lucasfilm on Disney Plus. This week's episode was called The Solitary Clone. But before we get into that, I want to ask you, Kristen, similarly to what I asked you at the top of the Willow discussion, what were your thoughts coming into this season? I'm sure you enjoyed season one. So what are your thoughts on this show as a whole before and the season premiere last week before we get into the new episode?
I really like how they're setting up the character development this season with the Bad Batch crew and Omega and kind of her journey and her understanding. She looks, or Omega looks uh, older. So I'm
Mhm.
wondering, what they're learning and how they're developing, especially hearing conversations related to war and running from the empire and trying to make it on your own. So I'm very interested in that. And season one kind of left us in this cliffhanger of where does Crosshair stand exactly? Because, he had two opportunities. If I recall correctly, he had two opportunities to join the Bad Batch crew and to leave the Empire behind. And
Mhm.
he turned both of those opportunities away. And he even saved Omega. So I, I'm very interested to see how this season sets up Crosshair's character development and if there is a redemption arc with him.
Yeah, so speaking of Crosshair, that is a perfect segue to get into talking about this week's episode, The Solitary Clone, which is a Crosshair focused episode. And I gotta say right off the top here, having seen it a few times now, I think this might be my favorite episode of The Bad
Oh,
Batch.
okay.
I don't and it's weird to say that because I am fully aware that The Bad Batch is not in this episode. It
Yeah,
is
yeah.
entirely
Well,
on the
technically, I mean, Crosshair
right.
was part of the Bad
What yeah,
Batch.
and featuring an ex-member of the
Yeah.
Bad Batch, but the Bad Batch as we know them now are not around. It is almost entirely focused on Crosshair and a mission that he embarks on for the Empire. So let's talk about first where Crosshair is at the beginning of this episode. How would you describe his kind of state of mind? Now, this is the first time we've seen him in season two. So how would you describe where he's at when we first encounter him?
So it seems very bleak where he's at.
Yeah.
It's giving me very much a he's going through some type of depression. And he's a solitary person, as the name of the episode implies. Like his fellow clones won't sit with him. He's not really cared about that much by people around him and the higher ups. And the even how he wakes up before the alarm in his where
Right.
he's staying at, it's very Groundhog Day almost. And
Uh-huh.
it kind of made me think of Andor when Andor's in prison, Cassian's in prison, and they have that whole structure where you're up by a certain time, you get up, you do your work, you do what you got to do. And it gave me that vibe where Crosshair is essentially in a prison.
Yeah.
And, not only is he in a prison, he's chosen to be there and he has to rectify that with himself.
Absolutely. And what do you think it is about what happened to Crosshair at the end of season one that makes him kind of isolated from all the other clones. He sits at the table in the commissary or whatever, and the other clone troopers just kind of get up and leave him there by himself. Why do you think he's being treated this way? What is it about what happened to him that marked him both physically and socially among the other clones?
My understanding was that when we found out that contract between the Empire and Camino was null and void, my understanding was that there might have been some conversations between clone troopers saying, well, we're about to be out of a job. We're about to
Yeah,
be, taken out back and dealt with and replaced. And Crosshair, he's running with them. He's running with the people that are
right.
making us irrelevant. So that's kind of my understanding of why they are distancing themselves from him. I know there have been some clone troopers in the first season that have gone AWOL, and I know we'll talk about that a little bit more with a certain
Yeah,
somebody that makes me a
right.
little excited. But I'm wondering if they're having second doubts as well, and they're talking amongst each other of is this empire something that's really worth serving? And Crosshair is very much we're a clone, we follow orders. So that's kind of how I interpreted they don't want anything to do with him.
Okay, yeah, I think that's a pretty good interpretation. Definitely better than anything I came up with. So, um, uh, Crosshair gets called into Vice Admiral Rampart's office, and he is given a new assignment, which Crosshair at first assumes that he's going to be in charge, and then Rampart says, "You're not ready for that yet. I'm putting you under Commander Cody."
Commander
Uh,
Cody.
yeah. So I have to admit something to you now. I'm a bit of an older Star Wars fan. I grew up on the original trilogy. I only very recently, within the last like 5 years, watched the Clone Wars animated series, like beginning to end. So, um, I guess my question is, what is special about Cody?
Sort of his relationship with Obi-Wan. I would say that's the most special part about Cody, excuse me. I
Mm,
combined them. Is that the ship term, Kobe?
Kobe,
Um,
Kobe Wan. Yeah,
uh, I think that relationship there, and how him and General Kenobi would always lead their task force, and there was that friendship, and Cody sort of had a personality of his own and was very friendly and loyal, and we got to see a lot of him throughout the Clone War season, and we formed this bond with him. So it twists the knife when he's the one that shoots at Obi-Wan in Revenge of the Sith. Like, as soon as he hands him his lightsaber, he gets that order and that loyalty, that allegiance out the window. So that's heartbreaking.
so thank you for that, enlightening me about Cody there, because yeah, I've seen that series, I think, once all the way through. I know Cody is one of the clones that gets named more often than the others, but I'm like,
Hmm.
sometimes I have trouble keeping all the clones in my head, to be honest with you. I know Rex, just from the amount of times that he's popped up, especially in
Yeah.
recent years and stuff. But so Cody is put in command of Crosshair, and they're sent with a battalion of. Oh, first of all, I want to mention this memorial wall that they stand in
Yeah.
front of. Now, I believe this is on Coruscant, right? Now, this would be, I'm guessing it because it looked in the background like a big city planet, so it must be Coruscant that they're on. They're kind of like an imperial barracks, and the memorial wall reminded me a lot of the Vietnam Memorial in
Mm.
Washington D.C. I'm sure that was the intent. And then I saw, I read some Arabic, and I was kind of like looking to see if I could read any names on the back there. And then I saw somebody on Twitter had gone through the whole thing and said that it was mostly gibberish. It's
Oh,
not, there's not really any real names written in Arabic on the wall, but I thought it was a neat visual.
yeah. I
Um,
was I was kind of hoping it would be names, or names and or numbers of clone troopers,
yeah,
and kind of using that as a way to reinforce the propaganda that the Jedi were the ones that betrayed the Republic, and the Empire was the one that had to step in, essentially. And these are the guys who lost their lives in the process. So I was kind of hoping it would be that, but
okay.
it's gibberish. So I
I
guess
think
it's up to our interpretation.
even if they're not actual names written in Arabic on the wall, I think the implication is that they were clone soldiers that fell in the war. I think that the end goal is probably the same as what you were talking about, if I had to
Yeah.
guess of what the intent was. Anyway, they are sent to this planet called Desix, where a an imperial governor has been taken hostage by the local government there, who has declared themselves an independent planet, right? And there's the previous governor. And correct me if I'm misinterpreting this or misremembering this as well. But the previous governor is named Tawny Ames,
Mhm.
and she's basically saying, "Oh, we were never part of the Republic. We don't consider ourselves part of the Empire. We don't fall under your jurisdiction." So they've rejected imperial rule. They've taken this governor hostage, imperial governor hostage, and this is the mission Crosshair and Cody are going on, is to reclaim the planet and rescue this guy. Am I right so far?
Yeah, yeah, that's it. That's perfect.
Okay, what did you think of this whole situation? Give me your thoughts on how the plot of this episode kind of kicks off.
So it's kind of interesting because the previous episode with the Bad Batch, when they're talking about the planet that Dooku was on and the treasures that were stolen,
Right.
and the guy that they're with, you have um, the techie guy that gets his leg injured.
Yeah, I believe Tech is
Tech,
his name.
yeah, okay, okay. I was thinking between, like, Tech, and then I was like I was gonna say, Data, but I was like, "No, that's Star Trek."
Right.
I gotta split those. But so, Tech is kind of saying, like, "Oh, you have a separatist archive?"
Mhm.
And the guy was like, "We were a planet of people
Right.
before the separatist." And Tech was just had this out of body moment of, "I never thought of it like that." So I feel like that does a great job of segueing into this episode where you have
Mm.
Crosshair and Commander Cody going to this planet that doesn't have an allegiance to the Republic, and who might have sided with the separatists so they can gain their independency. Like, this is a planet of people that existed before the war started, before the war that was, ultimately started by the Emperor. So I really like how they did a good job of setting that up and getting into that conflict with that.
Absolutely. So speaking of conflict, they get to this planet and the Imperial shuttle is shot down by the battle droids and the um, tactical droid on Desix. And then the droids go and investigate to see if anyone survived the crash. And they kind of assume that everybody died, but it turns out that I think like half of the clone troopers and Crosshair and Cody are able to kind of walk out and continue on in their mission. And from there, we just kind of get like this really big fun. Fun is a weird way to describe it, but
It was fun.
I did think it was fun, even though we're watching. We're kind of on the villain's side, like we're given the villain's perspective, I would say,
Yeah.
on this battle because the Empire is not who we should be siding with, but we are seeing it from their perspective. And I just thought all the action was so well choreographed and exciting. I don't know. What did you
Mhm.
think of this big battle to reclaim the fortress there on Desix?
I like that it was a step up from what we've been seeing in the Clone Wars, because it's to me it was kind of a callback where you have, Commander Cody fighting the separatist droids again, and that felt familiar, that felt safe, but at the same time it was jarring because you're like, "Oh no, these are the bad guys now. I can't be rooting
Right.
for them."
Right.
But I love the action sequence. I love that Crosshair had a way of hitting his target, and it was just these reflective,
Yeah.
like, beads he would throw up. And when he told Cody, like, "Just throw it," and you're thinking, "What's gonna happen?" And then he does it, and then it, like, hits that droid head on. It's really cool to see, but it's also a good reminder that this guy's dangerous. He is dangerous, and now I'm sure he's going to be going after the Bad Batch once more. It kind of elevates that danger of, okay, they have a lot going against them right now.
Yeah, Crosshair is really good at what he does. I loved exactly what you just said. Those little mirrors, little circular mirrors he puts on the
Yeah.
wall. That whole sequence of them going up that spiral staircase. was fantastic.
Mhm.
Again, just the action really impressed me in this episode. And then they get to the top of the tower, and there's this confrontation between Crosshair and Cody, and let's see, what was her name? Tawny Ames. And she's still got the governor. His name was Governor Groton. She's got him hostage, tied up in a chair. And this was a really dark, I would call it dark, I think is a good
Yeah,
word, dark
very dark.
scene.
Very dark.
What are your thoughts on what went down? How would you describe this scene if somebody hasn't seen it?
So, I would describe the scene, so there's a lot happening. You have, a planet's last chance at
Yeah,
peace and a last chance against the Empire. And as much as you're rooting for the planet, you know that the Empire is gonna win. They have the resources right now. So it's you're watching hope die in front of you. You're
yeah,
watching peace die in front of you. And you're watching a defeated Commander Cody saying, "Please, I'm tired of fighting. I don't want to kill you. We can negotiate." And the governor giving the order to execute her, get it done with. And Cody's like, "Whoa, no! Like we've reached a resolve here." And then Crosshair just immediately doing it, and it's so in contrast to how we see him at the end of season one, where he's rescued Omega. He's, gotten rid of his task force that came with him to hunt the Bad Batch. And now he's right back in it. And
yeah.
you're watching hope die. It's very bleak.
Yeah, and to me, the ending of this episode pretty much secures Crosshair's place as the villain
Hmm.
of this series, because he doesn't really when Cody hesitates in killing that woman, Tawny Ames, Crosshair doesn't, and he just shoots her
No
dead
hesitation.
there.
No hesitation.
No
Yeah.
hesitation, in cold blood, after Cody had promised her peace, and the governor ordered them to kill her. Yeah, and it brings up the question that I have for you, which is, I think kind of an overarching theme for the Bad Batch, and going back a little bit into the end of the Clone Wars, is what how much free will does a clone have? And they talk about this actually in the episode, about the difference between a droid and
Hmm.
a clone, and the difference is that the clones can make their own decisions. This is a conversation that Cody and Crosshair have, and they have to live with their decisions as well. So, I guess the question is for you: the clones have these inhibitor chips in their
Yeah.
heads that, I guess, make them follow the Emperor's orders, or they had the programming for Order 66 in it, or whatever. But what do you think it is that pushes a clone over the edge into defying Imperial orders?
So I thought that with the inhibitor chips, that if you defied orders, you're kind of zapped out.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if the inhibitor chips were only put in place for eventually Order 66.
Mm,
And that after that, it just kind of sat there useless. And
okay.
then, the clones could um, figure out next moves if they wanted to be loyal to the Empire or if they wanted to have their own thing. So I'm not so sure. I think that is interesting. If after they completed Order 66, there is this idea of being irrelevant, and that maybe the main purpose of the cloning technology wasn't necessarily for a clone army, but for how the Emperor could stay in power longer. And they were just kind of a means to an end. And now that they've fulfilled that, um, you know, they are they're done. That's
Hmm.
that's all. So I'm wondering if they do have the free will now to choose, because
Okay.
if Cody went AWOL,
Yeah.
he should have been dead,
Right.
but he's not that we know of. So I don't know. I genuinely don't know.
Yeah, I like that interpretation. So you're saying, like, both the chip and the clones are kind of vestigial
Mhm.
after Order 66, and we've already seen in this series how the Empire is starting to recruit non-cloned humans to be
Mhm.
stormtroopers as part of, what is it, Operation War Mantle, um, that will eventually all of the Imperial troops will just be regular old humans. And then we saw kind of, I think it was in the Obi-Wan Kenobi live action series, we see kind of the end result of that when Obi-Wan encounters that homeless clone
Mhm.
that's kind of been thrown away, a veteran clone begging for change on that one neon planet.
Yeah.
Um, but it all kind of ties together, and I really like the themes that are playing out here. So the end of this episode, like you said, we find out that Cody has gone AWOL, and uh, Crosshair gets a new mission. He's assigned a new commander by Rampart. What is your read of Crosshair's emotions and state of mind at the end of this episode compared to the beginning? What do you think he's thinking? Because a really interesting line that Rampart has in this episode at the end there, he kind of makes this observation that the other clones around Crosshair have this tendency of disappearing, of going AWOL, basically.
Yeah.
So what do you think that means for Crosshair, and what do you think his response is to it?
I think Crosshair needs to read the room. No one in
Yeah,
the Empire likes him. And, Rampart made a good point when he's like, "You were left on Camino for like a long time and you still came back." Like
yeah,
there's no loyalty that Rampart has to Crosshair to anybody, and he's not in a good position. And either he is willfully ignorant of it, or he just genuinely all he knows is to follow orders. So I'm wondering, with Commander Cody being there in that moment, if that sparked a little bit of that hesitation of, oh, I don't know. Because if he rescued Omega at the end of season one, I can't imagine him trying to kill Omega at
right.
the end of season two or throughout the season. So I feel like he is conflicted, but he needs to hurry up and read the room here, because his like it's staring him in the face. No one likes him.
Right.
No one likes him in the Empire. He is disposable, just like the rest of his clone counterparts. It doesn't matter that he can hit a target with small little mirrors. They don't care about that. They do not care about that.
But
So,
yeah,
oh, go ahead. I'm
sorry, I
sorry.
don't mean to interrupt. As you said earlier in this discussion, Crosshair has had multiple opportunities to redeem himself.
Yeah.
Even in this, I think the assumption with a Star Wars villain is by the end of his story, he's going to get redeemed, his or her, whatever. Um, because it's happened so many times. We've seen it with Darth Vader. We've seen it with Kylo Ren.
Hmm.
It just, these characters keep getting redeemed by the end of their arcs. So the assumption going into the Bad Batch, when we found out at the beginning of the series that Crosshair was going to be the villain, the assumption is he's going to find himself come toward the light or whatever by the end. And then when that moment comes at the end of season one, he says he removed his chip and he's chosen to stay with the Empire. And then we even
Hmm.
get to this episode and we watch him murder that woman in cold blood. And I'm thinking, well, maybe there won't be a redemption arc
Yeah.
for Crosshair.
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you think it's possible that he won't be redeemed at all?
It all comes down to a choice. And again, it goes back to Luke Skywalker in Battlefront 2, where he
Yeah.
says, we have a choice to be better. So with these redemption arcs, it's always because of a choice that these guys made. Darth Vader made a choice to kill the Emperor to save his son. Kylo
Mhm.
Ren made a choice to help Rey out and destroy the Emperor one final time. And Crosshair has made multiple choices to side himself with the Empire. I don't know if it's because of a payoff he's expecting that's just not going to come.
Yeah.
And when he realizes that it's going to be too late, maybe he's going to pull like a holdo maneuver or something as like one final like sacrifice. I don't know. But you make good points. He took out his inhibitor chip. He still chose to be with the Empire. He rescued Omega, still chose to be with the Empire. They left him for dead, and he still came back to them. So I feel like with these choices, he's going to keep on making the wrong choices. So
Mhm.
I don't know. I don't know if redemption is in his future.
Well, we will find out as there's still 14 episodes left. Oh no,
Still 14 episodes.
13, 13 episodes, but who's counting?
I'd love to be wrong. Listen, I'd love to be wrong. Please prove me wrong.
we'll see what happens with Crosshair as this continues. So I gave my opinion about this episode at the start of this discussion, but I neglected to ask you, what did you think of the solitary clone?
I really liked it. And I thought that even though it was about Crosshair, I felt like the solitary clone was also about Commander Cody
Okay,
because he's kind of alone in his thoughts of, should I be serving the Empire? Is this really worth fighting for? And then ultimately, he's the solitary clone in that pack that leaves, that goes AWOL and
yeah,
makes that choice. So I really liked that. I thought it was beautifully shot. I thought the animation was spectacular in it,
yeah.
the visuals, the fight scene, the choices that were made in this episode. I feel like it's a really good setup for what's to come. So I absolutely enjoyed it.
Yeah, totally agreed. And I guess that's going to bring us to the final question about the Bad Batch, which is what else are you hoping or expecting to see for the remainder of this season?
I don't know. I know at the end of season one, the two Kaminoans they get pulled up, or at least
Yeah.
one of them gets pulled up to work for the Empire to do some cloning research.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping we get more insight into that. I know it might be alluding to the Emperor cloning himself
Right.
during the Resistance in the First Order. So I'm wondering how they're setting that up and how that's going to tie in with everything. So I'll be very curious to see if the second season explores that at all, and if we get more backstory with Omega's character development, and if we get more Fennec Shan. I would love that.
Fennec Shan, yeah. I was gonna. My next question was going to be which other characters are you hoping are going to pop up? So I think Fennec Shand is a great choice, and I know people were really hoping last season that Omega would meet her pseudo brother Boba
Hmm.
Fett. So I don't
Oh,
know
interesting.
who knows if that will happen. We'll stay tuned to the Bad Batch on Disney Plus to find out. Anything else you'd like to say about that series before we move on to the end of the show here?
I'm having fun watching it. It's a blast.
Me too. Me too. Enjoying it. And like I said, yeah, I don't think I was ever more into the Bad Batch than after this episode. This one really grabbed me and I really enjoyed it. So,
That's
uh,
great.
le- excellent. So let's go to the final segment of Who's the Boss. It's called First Steps into a Larger World, where we talk about the media we are consuming and or enjoying outside of Star Wars. My selection this week is a video game that I got during the holidays. It's called Midnight Suns. It is a
Mm.
Marvel game with all your favorite Marvel superheroes.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
from the developer of a video game called XCOM, which is one of my favorite games of all time. So this is like a match made in heaven. And I'm just like, my wife and I are actually both really into this game. She loves watching me play because, in addition to the fighting, which is like a turn based
Mhm.
card deck building type game, kind of a little outside the box for a video game, but in between the fights, there's a lot of like socializing between all the
Mm.
superheroes. You kind of have to like make friends with them and earn their respect and stuff, and that helps you gain more abilities in the battles and stuff. So I'm totally addicted to this game. I looked up the length because I felt like I was a fair way through the game, and I was like, "When is this? Am I near the end?" And I heard it's like over 100 hours long.
Oh my
So
gosh.
it's a nice chunk of time that you can spend on this game, and I highly recommend it. It's called Midnight Suns. I got it for the PS5. I think it's coming out for other consoles as well. So, um, how about you? What have you been reading, writing, watching, enjoying lately, Kristen? What do you think?
Oh my gosh, a little bit of everything. So I'm in the process of replaying The Last of Us so I can get ready
Okay,
for The Last of Us show on HBO, which I'm really
right, with
excited about.
Pedro Pascal. Do
Let's
you
do it.
see any correlation between like he's a Pedro Pascal is kind of a loner and he's in charge of a young person on this
Huh, that sounds
journey.
familiar. It's not ringing a bell. But I've been taking care of that. I played it a while ago, and my husband Brent, he really likes to watch me play video games,
Okay.
and he'll watch me play scary video games, and he'll be like, I will watch you over here and support you." But he won't play scary video games.
Okay.
I've also been watching White Lotus. I got through the first season. I'm in the second season now. No spoilers, please. That's been really good.
I haven't seen
Um,
it, so I can't spoil it, but I've heard good things.
it's good. It's good. The
Okay.
theme song is very addicting to listen to. Like it scratches this itch in my brain.
Okay.
I don't know why, but I like it. I'm also replaying Breath of the Wild. I really enjoyed my first
Ooh.
go through of that, so I'm playing through that
Yeah.
again. And
When is Breath of the Wild 2 coming out? Is that the end of this year or you know?
I want to say yes, maybe. I
Okay.
thought it was going to be the end of this quarter, but I don't know. Um,
Looking forward to
I've
that.
been replaying that and getting some things that I've missed. So I've also been replaying Jedi Fallen Order, but that's Star Wars stuff.
I
So
know. Yeah, I wanna go through that again before Survivor
yeah,
comes out just as a refresher, but who has the time
who
with
has
all
the
these
time?
with all these video games?
I know, and you got 100 hours
I
of
know.
that game to
Midnight
play. So
Suns,
Midnight
yeah,
Suns.
yeah. I feel like we're maybe halfway through, but, it's a good one. So, yeah, thank you for those suggestions. I think those are some I gotta watch White Lotus 'cause, seems like that's a show everybody's talking about, so
Yeah,
I'll have to
yeah,
check
it's
that one
good.
out. Excellent. That's gonna bring us to the end of this week's episode of Who's the Boss. Big thanks to my guest this week, Kristen Bates. Where can people find you, Kristen?
I am unfortunately still on twitter.com. You can find me at Kristen K. Bates. If you don't partake in Twitter anymore, totally understandable. You can find me at the Hive Social
Yeah.
at Kristen K. Bates. I'm
Okay.
on Instagram at Kristen K. Bates. You could also check out my LinkedIn profile and get connected that way. That's totally cool. And I think that's it.
Well, I really wanna thank you for coming on the show. I think this was a really terrific conversation.
Yes, I'm so glad I got invited. Thank you, Mike, for having me.
Absolutely. So next week on Who's the Boss, we're going to be talking about the fourth episode of The Bad Batch season 2. And as always, please visit laughingplace.com. I am constantly, like I said earlier, putting up Star Wars reviews. I just did the Super Nintendo World over at Universal Studios Hollywood to put up a bunch of photos and videos from that. So lots of exciting stuff happening at the theme parks and in the world of Star Wars over at laughingplace.com. And then I am also unfortunately on Twitter at Who's the Bossk Pod, but then on Hive, I am just Who's the Bossk. So you can find me on both of those as well. Thank you so much out there for listening, and I'll see you right here next week. Again, my name is Mike Celestino. Thanks again. Bye.